B-A-T. It's in the name.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis. Joining us on today's episode is Dr. Alan Baggett. Alan is an academic internal medicine attending physician at the UAB Huntsville Regional Medical Campus and also serves as a medical director for a Huntsville, Alabama-based hospice organization. Today's discussion about the stresses of the medical field and how to serve those in the end-of-life phase is a must-listen. We'll get right to the interview after these messages. This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you in partnership with ministryleague.com. We would love for more people to discover this show, so please rate and review us on iTunes or your podcast provider. Feel free to share on your social media and subscribe at benandtravis.com for the free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living.
I'm Travis Creasy. That's All-Pro Counselor Ben Hayes.
Trying not to make sudden movements.
That's Will Mahan.
What's up, fellas?
And as promised, we have Dr. Alan Baggett with us.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Man, we're great. We're happy to have you. I'm always excited when people who have seen me at my absolute worst still decide to have something to do with me. Dr. Alan Baggett, it's great to have you on. And we met in probably odd circumstances. I was a patient at Huntsville Hospital. You found, I guess, through social media that I was in Huntsville Hospital.
That's right.
And decided you'd come by and see me. And, man, I appreciate it because you brought me all kinds of good stuff.
Thanks, brother. Hey, it was just an opportunity, and I'm glad I jumped on it. So, it was really good to get to know you. And, through that, get to know Ben and Will. And, I've known Ben for a while, but to get to know you guys has been awesome.
Even more representative of your patience and love and grace and mercy that you're reflecting in this very interview of the image of Jesus in loving us.
Don't write me off yet,
and giving us some of your precious time to be with us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're glad to have you with us. And I've got the Friday Refresh question of the day. You can check out Friday Refresh every other Friday at benandtravis.com. In fact, we just released one this past Friday. So here's the question of the day. Being in the medical field as an educator, along with working with hospice, what advice might you give a believer who's looking to join either or both of those fields?
Well, that's a deep question there, Ben. I may have to split it up. So education is, it's such an awesome opportunity to get to take somebody that is just getting started in a field and wants to really grow and develop. Leading them and mentoring them is an awesome responsibility. So if you have that heart to teach, no matter what the subject is or the setting, I just push you. I think it does take a special touch, and joking, but it takes quite a bit of patience to watch people learn and struggle and get their feet wet. In terms of medicine, it's a ministry, I think, in of itself. We joke quite a bit with my minister here at Owens Crossroads with Patty, and Travis and I have talked about it a little bit before as well. Medicine for me is very reminiscent of the church. I'll be honest with you, I'm not that smart of a guy, and so it's pretty clear to me that God put me into this because he wanted me to talk about Jesus, but he needed to make those opportunities very, very clear because I would miss them otherwise. And so, the hospital setting is a great opportunity to do that. And so I think probably the more common question that I get, or the most common comment around the subject that I get, is, man, it's a great thing that you're a scientist and you're a doctor and you're a Christian. That's so rare. And I don't really view it that way. I think God created this marvelous universe, created all these tidbits and scientific features and mathematics, all the stuff that's just going on in the background that make things work. And he put them all there for us to discover. And as we discover them, we reveal God's glory. And that's sort of how I view science and medicine and the practice. And
you were saying something earlier about kind of the years that they spend in it, and it being very reminiscent to the years that Jesus' disciples sort of followed him in ministry. Not to say that, anything about a doctor necessarily, but he was a great physician. You're a physician, so is there some connections in there?
Yeah. Well, for internal medicine, so I'm an internal medicine physician. And after you finish medical school, you do a residency at, this period of time where you're doctor so-and-so, but you really don't have the experience and the clinical acumen to be able to take care of patients independently. So you become an observer and a follower of an attending physician or multiple attendings in a hospital setting, in the clinic. And that process is 3 years long. And I'd like to think I'm nowhere near Jesus's capacity, like not even comparable. But I like to think that in that 3 years' time, I can teach compassion or how to care for somebody. And certainly that is a component of what Jesus wanted to do and what he tried to share with his disciples over that 3 year period of time. Another little just side, since we're on that topic. So, the physician white coat, you've probably seen in pictures. It's the standard of professionalism for medicine. It's actually based upon a religious cloak that priest in a certain sect and a Christian sect and order several centuries ago once wore. There's some churches that wear black cloaks, but a specific sect wore a white cloak to resemble purity. And so physicians don't really know why, but they grabbed a hold of that concept of purity and cleanliness and garnered it with a white coat. So a lot of religious ties.
One of the things you mentioned, and my brother is in kind of the after your state, he deals in funeral home directing and an embalmer and all that. And what I've seen through his occupation is a lot of opportunities to minister to a lot of people. And you mentioned that you deal also in the hospice realm of the medical world. And so I'm just kind of curious, how do you prepare yourself to go into these rooms, deal with these situations that seem just so down, or even the idea of depressing or just a really tragic situation that seems to be going on? And how do you minister in these situations?
The simple answer is just practice, just doing it over and over again. I can't say that there are not times where I suffer from compassion fatigue or compassion sort of burnout. When the weights get heavy and you feel like you're having the same conversation over and over again, it can get really tiring. But hospice, I've always sort of viewed that through a different lens as well. And I have certain goals in those conversations. Most people that are already on the hospice service have gone through what I find to be the most difficult choice, which is when you're in the hospital and you have an advanced disease and things just aren't going well. Physician walks into the room and says probably one of the most dreaded phrases that we can say: "I'm sorry, I don't have anything else to offer you." There's obviously a big lull in sadness that comes along with that process. Now, as Christians, we can step back and say, that's okay. God is always in control. He was in control before. He's in control in this moment. He's going to be in control afterwards. And I'm okay with that. And so I do certainly see, that people that have that level of faith go through that differently. But for the majority, or a fairly large percentage of folks, that moment of understanding our immortality is always a challenge. But if they have decided and gone through that and said, you know what, the doctors they're done poking on me and prodding on me, and really now I'm at the point where I want to spend time with my family and to enjoy the time that I have, and they've made that mental choice and transition, things change. And so, the conversations that I'm having at that point are very much different. Usually the patient seems to understand that I can't make you immortal, usually. And so then it becomes about symptom control. in taking away suffering and alleviating pain. And, one of my subtle, I guess, internal goals every day in hospice is I want to try to make somebody, if I can make everybody, but I want to make somebody in the room smile. If I can do that, I've achieved something. If I can get a giggle or a laugh, and that sounds so arbitrary, but if I can bring some levity into the room, some love, some care, and what I've been really trying to focus on and seek for, knock at the door and seek, is the opportunity to pray with families. And that has been a growing opportunity in hospice, and certainly in the hospital too, with families. And I find that provides a lot of support to them. And it also reassures me and gives me the confidence and the strength to walk out of that room and walk into the next one, and go through the day.
I used to do some work with hospice years ago when I was at Petersville. I was the chaplain. I was the assistant to the main chaplain. And so I did a lot of those conversations, just going in and visiting with people. And it was always a pleasure. It's always difficult when you lose those people. But I can understand a lot of what you're coming,
there's joy.
Yeah.
I do find joy in doing it because you can always take away. It's all about perspective. And I find that in Christianity too. There was a song service last night at a local church here, and the guy that was leading singing and kind of sharing his heart a bit was talking about how crazy the news media is. That literally yesterday, Russia is threatening nuclear war. And we had just sang the song, "I Still Have Joy." So there's this conundrum of craziness can go on around us, but we still have this inward joy that to the rest of the world doesn't make sense. And so perspective is key. It's very, very important in all those things.
I don't know if you guys have seen the show Parks and Rec, but we love Parks and Rec. And there's the Rob Lowe character, and then there's the guy's name. The character's name is Ben. I'm not sure who plays his part, but Ben is always the one who brings in hey, your city's bankrupt, and we're gonna have to close all this stuff. And Rob Lowe is the positive character, and so it's like, here's this really bad news, but here's this really good looking guy, Rob Lowe, who comes in, who's kind of hey, it's all going to be okay. We're going to be. And sometimes I feel like that guy. I'm the sideshow freak they bring in, hey, here's really bad news, but here's this guy. He's Tigger. He's really annoying any other time, but he's going to bring in this,
Right.
And most of it's like, I wish that guy would just go away. But to be able to do that for people in a time where it is dark, where it is dreary, is such a big deal. And as you spoke of, singing is a big part of that. I know that you and your wife love singing and praising God. And I just think about that, right? Whoever is sick may call the shepherds or the elders. If you have a song to sing, sing it,
Right.
So it's a big deal, a big part. And praying, of course.
It's a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, this crew right here would never try to bring levity to a crowd at all during difficult times.
I've often wondered, we're talking about science, and there's parts of evolution that I don't understand. I don't understand, if we evolved, why laughter? Like, I can understand happiness. I can understand anger. But I can't really understand laughter as a reaction to something even humorous. It's just a weird physiological thing, right? To have your diaphragm bounce up and down and uncontrollably cry and, crawl into a fetal position is not really a protective maneuver from an evolutionary standpoint. But it's very clear to me, again, that God gave us some wonderful traits and personalities and the capacity to handle challenging things in unique ways. And I'll say this too, that when others see that in you, it really can spark conversation, how you're managing a situation. And I know you guys have read Travis's book. I'll be very frank and honest with you. When I sat down with Travis that night in the hospital there several years back, I could already see that Travis was processing this differently than some patients. And that's a wonderful. I love to see that in other people. It's even in an uncomfortable, really scary time, seeing that joy and that confidence, being unearthed and uncovered is it's an awesome thing. So
especially in those starchy clothes.
Super starchy clothes, uncomfortable beds, uncontrolled temperatures. But Travis had like the best room.
I did. I don't know how I pulled that. Like,
He's had the best view. He had a very awesome room.
I appreciate that, Alan. I appreciate you making that happen and pull a few strings. This guy's got to get up here in this room.
I had no control over that at all.
There's no coincidence, I guess, to the fact that, we wanted to name the podcast Helping Healing Humor. And,
Right.
There's a connection to the Proverbs 17:22 that, merry heart does good like medicine. And a lot of people go, oh, we just thought it was a humorous podcast, and there's probably less humor sometimes in it than there is serious stuff. But we want to bring some of that into it and let people know that even in difficult times, it is okay to laugh, and it's okay to remember, good times. Laugh about good times, talk about good times too. We also have a kind of a soft spot in our heart for, and I'm sure you do too, for kids. And, as we think about Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, for all of us, what are some things that you do to cope with, I guess, that kind of suffering that I'm sure you see? But also, you mentioned compassion fatigue a while ago as well. How do you manage that? I've walked the halls of St. Jude because my son has been there. We've run through, all three of us have run through the campus of St. Jude, and it doesn't take long being there. It's a wonderful place, but man, it's tough sometimes to walk those halls and see those kids going through that. So give us some insight into what you doctors face when you see those things.
Let me be very frank and clear here. There's a reason why I'm not a pediatric oncologist. There are physicians that have bigger hearts than I can understand. You having the opportunity to go through St. Jude and walk the hallways says something about you. And let me just run with this. There are other people that would struggle to walk through that door, or would struggle to even consider like being there, right? And so there's a bit of a fear over interacting with those kids or interacting with those families, understandably so, because I don't understand. Nobody ever taught me how to deal with this, how to manage these scenarios. But then you get to do it, and what you realize is in the moment with the specific person or the patient that you're taking care of, you can get a connection. You can find something, and it's the same thing. Have a little joke and some humor, play, absorb those moments, and have a good time with it. Now, having conversations with those families and that group of people is a challenge. And as a physician, we train people, not in a spiritual context, trained physicians and residents how to manage those conversations. And a lot of it is probably very poor psychological coping. It is, you handle that conversation in the room. You sit down, you have the conversation, you make sure all the questions are answered. You give the family and the patient some time to respond and interact with you. And when everything's handled, you walk out of the room. And you take a moment, take a deep breath, and you bottle all that stuff up, and you play like it doesn't exist, and you go in and see the next patient.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how we've been training folks for a very, very long period of time, and it doesn't work. The reality is we all have bottles, and we all have capacity to do that for a period of time. But at some point, those bottles fill up, and we, become angry and upset, and just, I don't want to go to work today. I can't do this. And I think that's part of the compassion fatigue. So that phrase, the compassion fatigue thing, has really become a popular. I'm not sure if it's the case in ministry. It's got to be, I would imagine. But in medicine over the past,
counseling for sure, yeah.
It's really in the past 3 to 5 years become something that we're talking about more. We're training our residents to be aware of. And it's really, I think this is where the spiritual thing does start to apply. It's taking an account of yourself. Where's my heart at right now? What am I about to do? What's going on in my head? Do I need to reorganize some of those emotions a bit? Am I having a rough day already, before I have this conversation? And sort of organizing and compartmentalizing some of those things. I'll tell you, prayer is huge. And I have struggled with prayer at many points in my life. And even today, being very frank and honest, I would love for my prayer life to be stronger. But I find on my drive in the morning, if I'll take that 15, 20 minutes to get a point of meditation and thought, and, prepare myself for walking into the hospital and the conversations that I may need to have that day, and the patients that are really frustrated and drive me crazy, and those that are super sweet but have something going on that's concerning, and just to process that, ask for blessings and guidance and discernment and wisdom and patience and gifts of the Holy Spirit in these interactions. And I find that to be very, very useful. But walking out of the room after you've had a tough day, and the last couple of years especially, there's been some really heavy days and really tiring encounters in the hospital. And I know some of you guys have probably seen some of those comments on social media. Being able to communicate that with somebody else and vent. My wife is a huge support. I'm sure yours are the same. That you can come home and communicate those things with. Ministers. Close friends, counselors. I mean, I can't tell you how much value there is in just getting to sit down to somebody else and go through your problems and just letting them listen. But you got to have, us guys, we have to have the weakness to admit when we're struggling and when we're having a tough time, and just not bottle it up. That's what so many doctors do, and it doesn't go well.
You mentioned right there some difficult years, I assume, relating back to COVID. So shout out to all of you doctors and medical professionals, and if I may, all the crap that you had to go through, and opinions and just things that y'all were fighting. I can't imagine how all of that affected y'all's mental health and just flat out energy, and probably your compassion towards people, in some form or fashion. So just to take a second to praise those of you in the medical field and everything you had to endure these past few years, and probably still having to endure on some level, I would assume.
Yeah, I think it's changed us. And I know there were some studies that were done towards the end of COVID that looked at what were going to be the physician and nursing outcomes. What's going to happen based on reporting and surveys, and something along the lines of 10 to 15 physicians were going to walk away after things cooled off. There was this big push, and I think we all felt like we got to get through this. We got to get through this for everybody else, and then we're going to bottle up this challenge right now. We'll deal with it later. That's the default physician position. And we're starting to see some of that retirement and just people walking away. I know a lot of nurses and technicians and respiratory therapists have decided to find other things to do. And, it's a challenging thing. So, Will, I very much appreciate those comments. And I work with the best of the best of people. But I guess what I would say is we're humans, and we do have a heart, and we do care. And so, if you got a physician, you got somebody in your environment that you know and love, where you live, and you're listening to the podcast, and I'd say a prayer for them, because we have certainly needed that and felt it. Honestly, we felt the prayers over the past couple of years too.
As per tradition, Alan, we like to kind of bring things to an end with a little bit of fun. I think we've shown your personality throughout the show, but we do like to kind of bring up some things, as you mentioned, bring some levity. Give me your song, like if you're going to have a worship song, and it's just your jam of a worship song, if we can use that phrase, but you're going to hear one more worship devotional song. What's it going to be? And then give me your jam in the car. Like if it comes on, we're going to get the full. You're going to do the backup singing, the lead guitar, the drums, the whole.
You guys listen to, or probably have at some point, a cappella and vocal union. Keith Lancaster's groups from York. Vocal Union has a song called "Teaching the Truth in Love."
Oh, that is good.
And that's an amazing. Excuse me, that's a cappella. It's "Teaching the Truth in Love."
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a song by Vocal Union that's called "Once Upon a Tree." And if you haven't listened to either one of those recently, just YouTube it.
It's a great song.
I find myself in the hospital. Huntsville Hospital has got some acoustics. It's got some really nice, like solid brick, tile floor stairwells. and they have some amazing, they're like 8 stories tall, and they have some amazing acoustics. And so, yeah, I'll be in there with like 9 or 10 people going around, but that might be hummed under my breath pretty frequently. So I'd love to see that rolled into service Sunday morning. And then probably not appropriate for Sunday morning service would be AC/DC Back in Black. I think would probably be the rocking out drum set, air guitar.
You know, there's a progressive church out there somewhere who is jamming to AC/DC. Right?
Yeah, it could be done. It would be a little strong, I think, for most of our fellowship. But yeah, that's a hands off the steering wheel. Probably going to have a car accident if not too careful there.
We certainly appreciate you being so patient with us and sharing with us your time. We know that as we get older, we've come to the conclusion that that's very precious, and so we thank you once again for your example to all the people you serve every single day, and your willingness to join us on this podcast.
Don't forget to share it, subscribe to the podcast, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.